if that's their inputs, $1,000 per, and then they have to wait possibly years to get a return on that, they may as well get into the bourbon or wine game. Like it's such a heavy upfront investment. Yeah. I'm always more inclined to encourage someone to consider husbandry and practices instead of breed.
We moved out here in 2015 and started raising chickens, pigs, rabbits, laying hens. From that point, just started throwing everything at the wall. Since then, we've reduced a bunch of the stuff that we're doing, so now we're just raising pigs and teaching educational classes. Because they're in Europe doesn't mean they can do things better. So we thought we would try it without really any experience. The first year, Doug salted a ham and put up a prosciutto. We always tell people this is like the epitome of slow food because this does not turn around in 6 months or even a year.
Maybe that's a better question. Can you do this if you're trying to make money off? So we are at a really cool place today. I'm with Andy and Doug, and we're at Hand Hewn. You guys are like the staples for processing charcuteries.
I'm glad we're in that space.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah, I love it, I love it. I'm so excited. So we're walking to go see your pigs right now. Let's walk that way, and if you want to give me like a brief overview of what brought you guys here doing this.
Brief overview, I don't know, 10 years ago-ish.
10 years ago.
More than that, 10 years ago. We were living on separate farms, doing a lot of the same things, raising chickens, rabbits. Doug was raising some pigs, all very small scale. We got this wild hair and decided we wanted to do it together on different property, larger property. We looked around for a long time and couldn't find anything that worked for us. And then I told Doug that my grandparents had about 300 acres, about an hour east of where we were living currently, or where we were. We asked my family if we could move out here and start farming, and oddly, they said yes. We moved out here in 2015 and started raising chickens, pigs, rabbits, laying hens. From that point, just started throwing everything at the wall. Since then, we've reduced a bunch of the stuff that we're doing, so now we're just raising pigs and teaching educational classes.
So you guys have really like centered in, and we talked about it off camera earlier. What drives you into like the education piece? Why did you want to do that part?
When we started butchering pigs together, we had no idea what we were doing. And we saw at that time there was a huge gap in information. The internet had some at that time. Again, this was like 2009, 2010 when we started. And so we had to learn everything kind of on our own. And it was frustrating, but also invigorating. Through that process, we also came in contact with other people that didn't know how to do it. And we started showing them, and we saw what that did with them and how excited they got. And from that point on, we just kept running into people that wanted to know, and we kept teaching. And it just kept going and kept going. And there's just been this constant flow of people that want to know what we're teaching. So it's fun for us to share that information in meaningful ways on people's farms, at our farm, so they can really get their hands on it and experience it. And then what we also love is sharing the food that is made from that process. So the cured meats and different ways to prepare pork and beef and things like that.
Right now, from a farm perspective, you guys are centered on pigs. What are like your roles on here? You guys are partners here, so how do you differentiate the roles on the farm?
Well, the pigs are pretty easy. We raise only a few at a time. I mean, we've had pigs on the ground here for 10 years, but we've never had more than 28 usually, and that was back when we had markets for pork. We scaled back about 4 years ago. Since then, we've had anywhere between 4 and 7 pigs all the time. We farrowed here from the very beginning. I've brought pigs in, I've brought piglets in, I've brought heavy hogs in, but we've always just had a rotation of our own stock. And because it's only a small number of pigs in a very large amount of woods, they're pretty well on autopilot. My sons, 14 and 16, take turns feeding them in the summer, and I come back and feed them the rest of the year. And I don't need to feed them at all. They've got more food than they can eat, but I feed them just to remind them that they're not feral wild hogs in the woods. For the most part, they're trained to the bucket or the sound of the stock trailer where I keep the feed. So the pigs are largely my responsibility. And then the workshops we run together, and then Andy does most of, if not all of, the back end communicating and reaching out to folks. Here we are.
So I see 4 here. So you say that you raise very few. You did have multiple species in the past.
Yeah, we have several breeds still. And the breeding, I I don't get hung up on breeds like a lot of folks do. Part of that's because when I started raising pigs 15 years ago, the breed availability wasn't anywhere close to what it is today. I mean, you were going to get pink pigs pretty much anywhere, fair pigs. You could maybe get some like blue butt or Tamworth were like the only available heritage pig in my area, and I would drive over an hour, hour and a half to get a heritage breed pig. So they were really, when the heritage breed boom happened and the homestead boom happened 8 to 10 years ago, it kind of brought along with it the different stock availability. And so people are really big fans of their different breeds, whether they're Berks or large blacks or GOS or I have some of all those, including red wattle and Russian boar. All of those breeds, I'm happy with. I'm happy with any of them. None of them have characteristics or traits that are offensive as a pig farmer or as a charcutier. So I'm always more inclined to encourage someone to consider husbandry and practices instead of breed. So
Why do you say that?
because you're eating meat. If you're going to raise pigs, it's to eat the meat. And a lot of people don't think of it that way per se. They think about what type of pig they want to have because of space, limitations, size. So a smaller breed pig is attractive oftentimes. But generally speaking, those smaller breed pigs are going to grow slower and yield far more fat to pork in proportion to a larger breed heritage pig. But you're not raising a pet, you're raising food. And so I always am inclined to encourage someone to consider a larger heritage breed pig, but raised well. And by well, I mean slowly with space to roam. So I know that everybody has that. I recognize that. We are very blessed to have a really large woodlot to raise pigs in. And I would always encourage someone, if they have a woodlot, to raise pigs there instead of on pasture. I think pastured pigs are
Out of their element.
Not all that they are cracked up to be. Yeah, they are out of their element. You can raise pigs on pasture successfully, but I've only seen that happen a couple times without the pasture being completely destroyed. And my pigs, so this one that's out right behind you, she found a hickory tree. And of course there's hickory nuts. Those hickory nuts just aren't on the surface, they're also under the surface. And so she's going to find them. And if I let her stay where she's at for too long, there will be a series of craters that it would be difficult to bush hog or drive a tractor across. And it's the same way on grass in a pasture. What grasses have that woodlands don't have is grass and sod and thatch and grubs. And those pigs will find those grubs underneath that sod or underneath that thatch. And they will just roll like a carpet. They'll roll up the grass. And if you look at the woods here, even though this is bare earth right here, it's because this is where they come up to feed. Every once in a while, I'll move their fence in and out just to let the grasses come back. But you won't see massive craters or pits here. Throughout the woods, they basically just go mop it up. They clean the surface. They don't take any real pleasure in rolling over dirt. They want to roll over sod because there's resistance to their snout and because there's grubs under it. And that doesn't happen in the woods. So they just go around mopping up the nut trees. And in this lot, we have hickories and oaks and walnuts and beech. And they're foraging pretty much nonstop in here. And,
especially this time of year.
And to me, I would rather have that context than have the highest quality papered breeding pig raised in a barn.
Now, I've heard from other people that when you put them out in the woods, that they can be damaging to the trees. Do you see that? Does it depend on the maturation of the forest that they're in, like young forest versus older forest?
I don't know if your camera can identify that tree right there.
The one right.
Yeah,
here.
with a band of dirt on it.
Yeah, I see.
That is from them scratching on it. So they get scratchy. Everybody that's raised pigs, they know that just like a dog, if you get scratched behind the ear, they'll lay into you to get a deeper scratch. They really enjoy that. And their haunches in particular, their hams, they like to rub up against trees. But I don't really feel like that's a concern because they want a tree that's not going to move when they're getting scratched. So they don't they don't pick on little trees when they need their butt scratched. They go to a big sturdy tree. So I don't really have that problem or concern. Now, will they root around a tree, yes, they will, but not for lack of food. So usually if I identify a stump I would like removed, I'll pour feed around that stump and they will eat all the way around it. And in fact, there's one right there. That used to be a full intact stump
over there.
just a couple months ago, and I decided I wanted it gone. And as an experiment, I started pouring feed around it. Now, that stump was rotted and decayed from insects. So the pigs are enjoying those insects as well as the feed. A healthy tree doesn't have those insects, and so they don't have any reason to go rooting around the base of a healthy tree, not in the same way.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I think that now that there are more breed diversities, like you said, with the homestead boom and the heritage breed boom, people get very locked in on being specific. But as I've learned through our travels and even just off camera chatting with people like you guys, it doesn't have to be that difficult, right? Like it doesn't have to be that serious. So
No.
you just have them out here in the woods and then you take them in for processing.
Well, we don't.
Well,
most people would, yes.
I mean for yourselves, right? Like you process them.
When we do kill one of our hogs, we don't take them anywhere until they're dead. So we'll come back here with the shotgun. That is always our preferred means of dispatch.
Why is
Whether
that?
it's here or somewhere else, because pigs don't like to be moved and they don't like to be isolated from the others. They don't like to be separated, they don't like to be solitary, as evidenced by this pig that has the whole world at her disposal, and she's laying right next to the rest of the pigs because she's a herding animal,
She
and
wants to be with her
they
kin.
don't want to be isolated. And if you come back to where your pigs are and you can shoot one of them and kill it well while it's still in its own fence, without fear, without anxiety, without stress, without movement, without isolation, then you just have the dead weight of an animal to move without the stress that can go on with loading it and moving it. And then offloading it or trying to shoot it on a trailer, all of those are just bad.
Yeah.
And they don't have to happen. When you come back to where the pigs are, they have no reason to feel anxiety or stress or fear or anything. They're just hanging out in their world, and then the lights go out. We would always prefer to kill a pig, or any animal for that matter, without removing it from its natural
Yeah.
environment.
Now, you only have pigs here, but do you have any other species throughout your own, like, homestead side, or
Just children. We have feral
Just children.
Yeah, children.
We don't have anything else right now. For many years, we raised all kinds of stuff, and for various factors, we have pared down to just the pigs.
what are those factors?
Oh, one of
Quality
them.
of life.
Yeah, that chiefly is actually quality of life. We also happen to be very, very fortunate to live in an agriculturally rich area. I could walk to a farm right over the hill there and get raw milk from a beautiful Jersey cow, and I can visit our friends down the road and get fresh laid eggs every single morning. And while that might feel like cheating to the ambitious homesteader, it's more like a cheat code.
Choosing your resources.
Yeah, it is choosing your resources. And we lived a life for many years where we were spinning lots of plates. And it was a constant juggling act, not just rotating and feeding, but also, like, we have serious raccoons and possums and skunks here. No matter where we had chicks or chickens or rabbits or feed, it was a continual battle just trying to keep those things safe or alive. And paring down to something like the pigs, it's both a business decision because we make our living off of teaching workshops on the pigs, but it's also, as Andy mentioned, a quality of life where if I go on vacation for a week, Andy has to come back here to this trailer and dump some feed out on the ground once a day. It's not an overwhelming charge
Yeah.
to pass the torch. And like I said, we have the option where we live to visit our neighbors and support them by buying their milk or eggs. We don't raise beef, but we do one beef workshop every year. We do that by, again, sourcing an animal from a local farm and bringing that animal here. It's the one exception to my rule where we trailer the beef to the farm and we show people how to humanely slaughter and skin and eviscerate and then the following day we break down a beef that's been hanging in the cooler that we purchased from a local butcher shop. So even that, we're able to patronize and support our local agricultural community without raising beef 12 months a year. So it just makes sense for us.
You guys have talked about how your mainstay, your staple has turned into education. Do we want to go back to the workshop and look at the amazing things that you have hanging in there and talk through some of that?
Yeah,
Okay.
Sure thing.
can even slice into some of it.
Ooh, yes. That sounds fabulous.
All right.
So you talked earlier a little bit about like breed specifics and fat composition. Now you guys are, I mean, yes, you have processing classes and butchering classes, but you also do the charcuterie. Now I was under the impression that charcuterie, you need high quality fats for that.
Absolutely.
And some
Absolutely you do.
breeds have been
Bread?
talked about. Some breeds have been discussed in that realm of having a certain quality of fat or not. How do you see that from a butcher standpoint? For example, we raised Mangalistas,
Okay, yep.
and we loved them. Their pork chops weren't huge.
Yep.
They did have a really large fat cap, lots of marbling, and then we started crossing them with like Berks
Berkshire,
and and then we saw the bigger pig that grew faster. The marbling was still there. It still tasted really well.
Right.
Yep.
So how are you seeing that from like a butcher's perspective of the quality of fat that you need when you want to do some of these specialized meat products?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question because the end result of any pig adventure is hopefully pork in some form or another.
Right.
So it always depends on what you want to get out of this pig, how your family eats. So if you are a family that likes fatty pork chops, the Mangalitsa is the way to go, you know? Or if you really utilize a lot of lard or you make a lot of soap. But I think a lot of people don't get to the point where they're making high-end cured meats right away. Before they get to that point, they usually just end up with a lot of extra fat that they're not sure what to do with. Me and my family use pork fat for everything. I'm using pork fat every day.
Yeah.
But even my family, again, consumes a lot of pork fat, couldn't utilize all of the Mangalitsa, like a purebred fatty Mangalitsa. We couldn't use all that fat in a year from one Mangalitsa. But when you go into the cured meat route, it's kind of the same. The fat on Mangalitsa is really excellent, but if you cut off a piece of prosciutto and half of its fat, most people that we serve that to, they don't eat that extra fat. People aren't used to eating that. Part of it's education, like telling people that this fat is not bad for you, it's actually delicious. But most American palates are not used to eating strips of fat, be it on a pork chop or on cured meat. We love pork fat in our cured meat, in our bacon, all of that stuff. There comes a point where you have sort of like a diminishing return. Like if it's a good quality fat, it's going to be delicious, you know, but one piece of pie is good.
But too much is too
Four
much.
pieces of pie is too much.
Yeah.
So there's a moderation in there that we try to keep in balance. It's really hard to use all that fat.
Yeah.
But you do want it to be a good fat.
There's also different types of fat on the pig. And depending on the breed of the pig, there is a density that is or is not found on that fat cap. So lard pigs in particular, Mangalitsas are a perfect example, Kunis, mulefoots, American guinea hogs, their fat cap, even if it were the same ratio of fat to loin, the fat is softer, like way softer. Mangas in particular, the fat will render out almost as you touch it, as you handle it. Your hands feel like you just had olive oil, like dripping from them.
It's good for your skin.
Which is
Great for your skin.
And it's also phenomenal for whole muscle use. So like a capicola or a culatello or a prosciutto, as Andy mentioned, that fat is spectacular because it's going to get buttery, creamy, soft, but not so good in a salami where you don't want soft fat. You want rigid, almost crunchy back fat, which you would get from any other breed of heritage breed pig that's not a lard pig. Back to the mutts that I have, the breed, like, I don't know, 6-way breed that I have now. They happen, this is not by design, but they happen to have the right consistency of fat within the muscle that yields a fat cap that isn't soft. We just are satisfied with that because that is our end. We want to have the prosciutto and the culatello, but we also want the salamis. And if we had just Mangalitsas, we probably wouldn't make salami.
It'd be really, really difficult.
We would have phenomenal prosciutto, world class.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't yield an excellent salami. And again, this is super nuanced, like Andy said. Most people that go down the road of raising pigs don't end up in this conversation.
I mean, we want them to.
The
but it
first
takes a
year
minute.
or two, yeah. But just like you had mentioned, you raised Mangalises, you loved the pork, a little bit more fat than you wanted, so you introduced a new breed to that line, and all of a sudden, you've got a different product that you have control over, and that's experiential. It's also very personal. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we do get in company with folks that raise pigs because they make tons of soap, and they can go through all of that lard. But if it's in your kitchen, you're going to be swimming in it.
Yeah.
If you raise more than a few lard pigs a year, you're not gonna know what to do with all of it.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, let's go see
Yes.
some of the meat that we've talked about.
We might have some different variations. We don't always write the breed of pig on the cured meat that we make, but there might be some we could
Okay.
notate
check out.
differences in breeds, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, let's see it. I mentioned it off camera when we were in here, but I just love the view of this up here. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, for better or worse, it's very romantic to a lot of people. You know,
Yeah.
it feels like they're walking into a butcher shop in Italy or something like
Yeah.
that. But no, it's all cured here,
That's
which
awesome.
is pretty fun. This is our walk-in cooler.
Okay.
So we have other meats and things in here. I can take some of these out too. So
Whatever, I'm game for whatever you want.
well, I'll take some of it out just for visual,
Okay.
I guess, and then
Yeah.
I'll get some to slice.
Is this an old school door, or did you guys make this?
This whole thing we got on Craigslist,
Wow.
actually.
It really just adds to the old, like the ancient way kind of feel.
Yeah, you don't need an antique wooden walk-in to do this. It's just good to remind people of. So here are two. This is a culatello, which
Okay.
in Italy, culo just means ass. Culatello means little ass. So it's basically
Little butt.
the butt cheek of the pig that's been cured and then stuffed into a pig bladder. That's
Okay.
why we
That's
we
what's
saved
blown
those.
up right there?
Yeah, those are pig bladders that we've saved.
Okay.
And this is a capicola. In Italy, the muscle group that you cure it from is called the coppa. That's why this thing says coppa on it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. It's not proprietary or anything. I mean, it kind of is, but we share this information all the time.
Okay.
So I'm going to cut two versions of, it's obviously not these that I'm cutting into, but this is a capicola, or a
Okay.
culatello, sorry, the
Okay.
little butt. This one is from January of 2021.
Wow.
So it's just salt and black pepper and a little bit of red wine that's had some garlic infused in it. And then this Copa Capicola is from a charcuterie workshop
Okay.
that we did in October of 2021. So this one's a little bit newer, but yeah, we can talk through the process.
Sure.
I'll slice some of this up.
So you use a mechanical slicer.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to, but the beauty of
Yes, you do.
cured meats is that it doesn't matter how old the pig is. When you slice it after it's been cured and you slice it thin, you don't register toughness the same way you would with like a pork chop. So most of the pigs that we're butchering are 2 to 3 years old,
Okay.
which is definitely not standard in American.
The pig.
The pig is 2 to 3 years
Oh,
old.
okay.
These cuts of meat, if they came off of a pig, especially like, again, a pork chop or even ham, the shoulder, they would be very, very tough unless they were cooked really, really well. But on an old pig, if you cure it and then slice it really, really thin, like I'm about to do, you don't register the toughness because it's so thin. And the other reason we use these old pigs for this purpose is there's more intrinsic flavor in the meat the older the pig is, or the older any animal is, really.
Smells so good.
This one's a little bit spicy, but it's not outrageous.
And you're cutting up some bread for this?
Focaccia.
It's some day-old focaccia I had up at the house I thought would be good. Well, I know it's good, but it's just...
Is it standard to have bread while you're eating the meat, or is that just what you guys like? I mean, hey, I'm all for bread. I'm
Yeah.
actually not going to complain about bread.
Yeah. We like having...
It's not necessarily standard, but
No.
But that culatello in particular, it has a profound amount of umami and fatty richness, and the focaccia actually grounds it and balances it. It's wonderful as it is, but if you were to eat it just plain, which I would still invite someone to do, it really, really begs for a
It's
sip
strong.
of wine
Yeah.
or something to follow because
Okay.
it's just so rich in the
Okay.
mouth. So the focaccia helps to kind of ground it a little bit.
So they hang for quite a few years.
So they get butchered first
Right.
and then cured, which is when the salt is actually doing its work. And after the curing time, then it's stuffed into a bladder, trussed, and then hung up. And depending on how big it is, will determine how long it should hang, because it's all a matter of how much moisture it loses over time.
Okay.
And you want that to happen slowly, so you don't want a really dry environment. That's why people traditionally would have hung these in cellars, spring houses, caves, things like that. Place where it would be basically cold and damp.
Yeah.
But with some air, you still need air movement also.
Right.
And then once it gets to its like sort of prime, then you clean it off, you take off the casing. This has the bladder, this has actually the peritoneum of the pig, which is like the internal lining of the pig fat. There's like a
Okay.
membrane there that we
Yeah.
scrape the fat off of and use to wrap capicola, which we showed our classes, which is fun. And we show how to preserve the bladder. But then after it's at its like peak dryness, which is usually at like 35 to 40% moisture loss, which is we calculate based off of
The weight.
the weight. That's why
Yeah.
there are weights written on there.
Yeah.
After that point, then we clean it all up and vacuum seal it, similar to how you saw me take them out before I sliced them. That
Yeah.
arrests the drying time.
Okay.
It doesn't stop its aging because the flavors do mature in a vacuum bag. They just don't dry anymore.
Okay.
So you don't want these to continually dry because at some point they would end up drying to the point that you wouldn't want to eat them. Like beyond jerky, chewy.
Yeah. Hard.
Here we're trying to get optimum flavor and texture. So this is a capicola
Okay.
that we, so this is from the neck portion of the pig.
Okay.
This was cured in 2021 and aged for probably 6 to 8 months. Usually that's what those take, and then has been in our walk-in since then.
And it's 2024.
Yep. So this
And
was
it's currently August of 2024. So it's been 3 years.
just about, yeah, it was October of 2024. Yeah. Which is when the pig was killed. So this was something that we made during a workshop, a charcuterie workshop where we focus a lot on cured meats.
You're right. It's very soft, like the thinly sliced. But you said this is from an older pig.
Yeah, this pig was most definitely over 2 years old, which in American agriculture is very
Weird.
old for a butcher weight pig. Usually those pigs are 5 to 8 months old.
Yeah.
Commercially, they're usually about 5 months old.
I taste the saltiness, and a lot of times, from my own perspective, the reason why we want traditionally cured versus currently cured is because of the type of salt that's used.
Sure.
So do you just use like regular salt? Or?
We teach people both methods for food safety and just for their own edification to know, like, you can do this just with salt. We will often at times use curing salts to educate people on how those are used because
Okay.
if used correctly, they're used in very, very small amounts.
Okay.
And some people feel more comfortable using those. And there are some differences when you use them as far as flavor, color retention. There's a food safety aspect, especially when you get into salami. But these traditionally cured meats just rely on salt to do the preservation part of it. And then over time, we also use the loss of water to help us with other food safety aspects like salmonella, listeria. You can eradicate the possibility of those if you reduce the water activity in
Okay.
the meat with aging.
That makes sense. Which, I mean, you talk about how little water there is in it, but because of the fat, I mean, it's so like smooth.
Right.
So-
It doesn't feel dry.
It doesn't feel like jerky.
No.
Yeah, which we want to avoid as much
Yeah.
as we can. Jerky's good.
Right.
This is not meant to be jerky.
Let's get the next one, and then I'm curious how
You can try a piece of this separate, but you
Okay.
can also try it on the bread
Okay.
if you want.
How did you guys learn these things? I mean, I know you talked about from in the beginning you were just kind of like figuring it out, but specifically with the aging, like how did you guys figure this out and like why?
So the first time we butchered pigs, we were aware that in Europe they did this. We weren't necessarily sure exactly how they did it, but we knew it, and we thought, why wouldn't we turn our pigs into these high quality products? Like,
Right.
just because they're in Europe doesn't mean they can do things better. So we thought we would try it without really any experience. The first year, Doug salted a ham and put up a prosciutto.
How did that turn out? Because that's an investment, right? Like that's gonna take.
It's at least a year in most cases.
Right.
Anymore, we tell people at least 18 months, but it was
It was 12
fantastic.
months when we cut into it.
Well, how did that turn out?
It was phenomenal.
It was amazing.
That's why we're doing what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was in 2000, and I think we cut into that in 2010.
How did you like wait the whole year? I mean, you want to talk about traditional methods versus the American methods, the modern, I should say the modern American methods.
Yeah.
Where we've got instant gratification. I want to go get my pepperoni in a plastic bag that, you know, doesn't have hardly any meat in it.
Yeah.
To raising the pig, killing the pig, and then waiting another year before you can eat that pig.
Yeah.
How did that work out, especially being so new?
Some of that is not so much about patience as much as it is about bounty. Like, was that the only pig you put away that year? If that was the only pig you put away that year, then you are asked quite a tall order to wait that long to eat any of it. On the other hand, that's not actually accurate. So if you were to put one pig away and you were to cure everything, and we do this for our workshops, we'll put a whole 400, 500 pound pig away without putting any of it in the freezer. But because some of that is going to be rillette and some of that is going to be salami and some of that's going to be capicola or lonza or all these other cured meats, there is a gradient of time before all of them have come to maturity. So some of them, depending on the salami gauge, we can enjoy in just 3 to 5 weeks, and then some of those smaller whole muscle, 3 to 5 months, and so there's a scale at which
trickle.
you could continually be enjoying it. I mean, obviously that first window of time you do have to wait, but even that, we make morcilla from the blood, which is like a blood sausage, and we do a liverwurst or a pate. All of those things you could be enjoying early on in the first couple days or weeks until your salamis are beginning to
Or
get
your
ready.
bacon. Your bacon's done in a week. You know, it doesn't take that long.
So
for bacon.
there is a scale at which, if it were the only thing you did, the only pig you put away, and you cured all of it, you would still be able to eat it as you waited.
Different muscle groups make
Correct,
different cuts, right? Like you're not just saying,
That's correct.
I'm gonna ground the whole pig and put it in this thing.
No.
Right.
That's not what's happening.
I mean, you could grind it all and make it into sausage, which
Right,
is great,
right.
but you wouldn't get these products. Yeah.
This is amazing.
Good. We're fond of it.
The last one you gave me, and almost had like a cheese kind of flavor.
Yep. The hams specifically do that a lot, the fat in the hams. And it's so, I think Doug maybe said it earlier, maybe I don't know if it was on camera or not, but how, like, coats your mouth. The bread actually kind of helps disperse some of that, because sometimes, I love it, but sometimes if you just eat that straight, it's really overwhelming to your mouth. Like, there's so much going on. It's hard to appreciate it sometimes because it's so intense.
Yeah.
So the bread kind of helps toss it around a little bit for you.
No, I love it. So do you know what breed these came off? Just because we were having the conversation about breeds, do you know?
Chances are really good. They're just like what we had out back.
Just a random.
Yeah, like a cross between like large black Tamworth, red
POS.
wattle, old spot, maybe some Russian boar. Not Irish, Russian boar. And there might even be some York and Hamp in them. It's been crossed many ways. We got some of this stock from our friends that had crossed a lot of different versions of some of their pigs. So it's definitely not a purebred anything. In fact, unless we're at someone else's farm, we rarely cure anything. This is purebred.
I love that you said, though, that it's more about like the husbandry of the animal than it is necessarily the breed of the animal, because you are what you eat is kind of like the whole part of it, right? I mean, that's phenomenal.
Yeah. And this is in the weeds a bunch, but in Europe, most people would poo-poo the idea that American cured meat could be as good than French or Italian or Spanish or German.
They've been doing it a lot longer.
They have.
Those traditions aren't really around.
What
here
they don't
anymore.
disclose, their high-end cured meats come from older pigs. So like a Hamon Iberico, that pig is not slaughtered at 5 months. That's 18 to 24 months old, the pig. The cured meat you find in America is never that old because it doesn't make sense financially to feed a pig for that long. We can make it work on our farm because we're utilizing that pig for our workshops and these meats, and we can sort of justify the cost of raising a pig that long.
Yeah.
But if Americans that put their pigs in hardwood forests raise their pig to an older age and create these meats, they rival anything you find in Europe.
I think
Most people would disagree with me, but they haven't had it, so they don't know.
Well, I think the industry standard for like a hog barn, if you were to go to like a swine operation from like farrow to finish, I think that pig has an overhead cost to the farmer of like $70. My pigs, I'm well over $1,000 per, which, as Andy mentioned, like that doesn't make any sense to the kind of American entrepreneur farmer, if that's their inputs, $1,000 per, and then they have to wait possibly years to get a return on that.
Yeah.
They may as well get into the bourbon or wine game. Like it's such a heavy upfront investment.
Yeah. I mean, piglet to end product, the pig that this culatello came from was probably 2 years old, and that culatello is now 3 years old. So a
over
lifespan of 5
5
years before you can actually...
Well, and it's more than
correct.
that because you have to raise the sow to get to breeding age. So it's closer to 6 or 7 years
Yep.
before this thing ever comes to fruition.
Yeah, and that's
a long
That is a
time.
long time, especially when it comes to food. We always tell people this is like the epitome of slow food because this does not turn around in 6 months or even a year.
I don't want to ask this question, but I feel like it needs to be asked. And I think it needs to be asked because a lot of people get caught up in making things a business. Making, like we talked about a little bit off camera, making things make money, making them profitable. There are people who want to do it just for homesteads, but you guys have found a way to make it educational, and that's how you make money off of it. Why do it? Or can you do it? Maybe that's the better question. Can you do this if you're trying to make money off of it?
Yeah,
That's a
but
good question.
not in the same way. So we've had inspectors into our space to say, hey, we don't want to just make this stuff for sale across state lines. We want to make this stuff for sale across state lines as a byproduct of our workshops. So we have the current model that we're operating in, and you're here too. And all of these attendees act as employees. And throughout the course of this weekend where we slaughter a hog and break the whole thing down and cure all of it and then have it stamped and available for sale. And they were willing to not just play ball, like they got behind it. They love the idea. A lot of that is because of scale. We're not only talking about 20 pigs a year maybe. And when they found that out, from their perspective, which is like a public health perspective, there's no such thing as an outbreak with 20 pigs. You know, there are facilities around
It's
here
so
that
limited,
have
yeah.
thousands
Yeah.
a day. 20 pigs a year, oh, give me a break. We can work with you. The answer to your question, though, is we would never be able to meet the demand. The day that we open, there would be such an unbelievable demand. We would be chasing our tails, always trying to satiate the market because no one is doing what we're doing the way that we're doing it. And so for us to meet that demand, we'd have to be doing something different, meaning sourcing pigs, not raising them.
And we'd have to have a much more robust aging situation because of scale.
And it would very quickly turn into a business model that would be profitable, but not one that we would design or create.
A really beautiful way for people to do this, and we often tell people this, in the normal hog raising scenario, most people that have a sow will send it to a butcher and just have it made into sausage because they think there's no other use for it. If you're going to do this and you want to do it kind of like we're doing it, where you raise an older animal and then you cure it, a premium thing, I think, is to just do it for yourself, first of all, and just take your spent sows or find someone that has an old sow and don't turn it into sausage, turn it into this stuff. Because then whoever has that sow has already gotten their money out of the sow through farrowing, hopefully. You don't have to look at it solely as the investment on raising that pig for the pig itself because you've had these other things that have come from it. So it's kind of paid for itself, hopefully, at that point. Taking an old sow and doing this sort of thing is the highest use of that sow. Turning it all into sausage, when we hear that, we kind of cringe a little bit because these older sows especially are where all the flavor is, especially in the cured meat.
I'm hearing that across the board with species. I won't say across the board. I'm hearing that also with cattle. Old dairy cow is the best meat that you will ever have.
Yeah.
And we got to try some. I have always been a Hereford fan and I like New York's. And I had an old dairy cow and it was a ribeye. I ate that whole dang thing.
Yeah. Yep.
It was so amazing.
Yep.
And
Beefy and flavorful.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that comes from the production model that we've seen where things have to be profitable and scalable.
Quickly.
So quickly.
Yep.
Very quickly. And we've forgotten that the older ones have a use too.
Yeah, and there are models in Europe. I don't know if anyone's doing it on any sort of scale in the United States, but taking old dairy cows and then aging them, putting up to 100 or more days of age on the carcass as well, and then butchering them, because then you start getting the cheesy flavors in fresh cut I mean, fresh after it's aging, but like a ribeye, for example, you get some of those cheesy notes in the ribeye from what would normally just be, at best, ground beef, at worst, dog food in a lot of cases.
So to finish up, how can people get started doing this? I mean, I know like personally, we want to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or stuff like this. I want to have something where we've got things hanging. How do people get started doing this? Of course, take your course.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is shameless plug time.
Absolutely.
But in reality, Doug and I say it at most of our workshops. If we could have gone to a workshop like what we offer 10 years ago, we would have been 5 years further ahead. Because we had to fumble a lot through the butchering, through the actual like killing the pig on our own property, sort of like just getting all that stuff figured out to where it didn't take all day. That took a long time. And then, so you have the live animal to like killing, to getting it to a point where you can actually butcher it, and then learning the butchering. And then when you butcher, if you've ever butchered an animal, it just multiplies. Then you have parts of everything everywhere. And you want your pork chop, but you also have everything else from the pig. It's very hard to find a specific place to get that information, from live pig to culatello in your cellar.
Yeah.
In fact, there is not a singular source for that. People ask us about books all the time. There's not a book for that thing. Maybe someday we'll get into that. But if you're going to get started, I think the easiest thing to do, if you're not going to come to one of our classes, which we highly recommend coming to one of our classes.
Absolutely.
But if you don't do that, go somewhere and get a cut of an animal. Don't deal with a live animal to start. So go to a local butcher and get a pork shoulder, and read about things you can do with a pork shoulder, because there's a ton of stuff you can do with a pork shoulder. You can make sausage, obviously. You can barbecue the butt. You can make a small ham from the picnic. You can cure the hock. You can also make salami. You can make capicola. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do with just that one cut.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to worry about all the other stuff. You don't have to worry about what you're doing with the organs or the blood or the feet or the tail. You simplify your work to get some information under your belt without all the stress of the whole animal.
Yeah.
That's probably the thing we would probably recommend first.
I think that's a wonderful recommendation, and that could go for so many pieces.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Or just buy a belly and make some bacon.
Yeah. When we bring that up to people at workshops, because anymore we have a very diverse demographic anymore. It's no longer just people that raise pigs and don't know how to go from A to B. We have lots of folks that will never raise animals, and they're here because they want to know where their food comes from, or they want a unique culinary experience, or they want to roll up their sleeves and like learn how to make something that they've never made before but they've heard of. And when we tell them, like, you can just go get a pork belly and make bacon. You don't have to like slaughter a hog to do that.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's wonderful because you're a part of the chain. Then you're not just a spectator. Coming here to the workshop is great, but that should be step one. That shouldn't be the end of the book. As Andy mentioned, just isolating a part or a portion and saying, well, what if? And you can do that with beef too. Beef is a way bigger quarter, for sure. But it's still possible. Like you can still do it, and that gives you some indication of how to dip your toes in the water. What are the things I'm going to need? What kind of knives am I going to use? What's my cutting surface going to be? Do I prefer vacuum bags or wrapping in cellophane and butcher paper? Like all of those things kind of begin to work themselves out as you go through this very isolated butchering experience. When you have the whole animal, it's a whole different animal.
Which, I mean, someone could even raise the animal, take it to the butcher, to the processor, and say, I want the quarter. I want the belly.
You can butcher the rest. I want this. Yeah, absolutely.
You can do that. That's okay.
Yep.
I'm kind of mind blown at the moment too. Like we could have been doing
There's
that
so many
all
possibilities.
along.
Oh yeah.
There's so many
if you want to make your own bacon, just tell the butcher just to give you the whole belly, and you'll take care of it.
Yeah, and then as we would always recommend, and this is why we do what we do today, these many years later, it's because we've always enjoyed doing it. This has never felt like work. And it doesn't feel like work because we do it together with friends in the room. We would say the same thing. If you raise animals and you're intimidated about this process, have somebody else buy a half of your pig or a quarter of your beef. And then you guys get together to do it. And it's an experience that isn't overwhelming because it shouldn't be a job.
Right.
And as long as you have a smaller piece to bite off, that first time, then it won't be overwhelming. You won't be drowning in the workload. So yeah, we are big advocates of this starting small and inviting people in.
Thank you both so much for having me out here and sharing some delicious product with me. This has been amazing. And we knew originally that we were going to take your course, but I mean, being here with you guys just solidifies like we will be coming to take your course.
All right,
That's
good to hear.
Point, it will be happening. So
Awesome.
Thank you again. I really appreciate you having me here.
You're very welcome.